Greetings, everyone. Welcome you to our first online class. Hopefully, everybody is in the home, taking care of themselves, listening to D Nice. But whatever you're doing, I'm glad you're there doing it, and I'm glad you take this time out to actually experience a little bit of class as we adjust. So, this is going to be the first of about, I would say, three videos, three or four. Very small videos that we'll put together for class, but also then when we have our discussion Monday night, we'll actually be able to talk more about the writing aspect of what you have to do, particularly going a little deeper in on the idea of writing the IRB. So we'll talk about that, field any questions you may have, and move on from there, okay? Today, what you're going to get from me is a talk about social theory in urban education. And in addition to that, we'll talk a little bit about resistance in the latter video. So we'll get there really quick, but now we'll start with the three foundations. Video one will cover functionalism by Emil Durkheim, and video two will cover Karl Marx and conflict theory. And the last video is covered by Max Weber, it's German, rationalism. So we'll cover those three aspects of social theory in urban education and apply them to schools. So let's go ahead and get started with our first one, which will be functionalism. So essentially what functionalism is a modern version of what we call social stratification. It views and believes that societies are systems that are full of interrelated components, and that every organization, every society, every group has this basic feature where you have components or people who serve as parts of the whole. If you think of it, it is essentially behind the model of the human body. Plato called this the organic theory of human understanding and government, that everyone plays a particular role. So the head has a different role than the hand. The foot has a different role than the leg. And problems only emerge when everyone wants to be the head or everyone doesn't want to play their particular part. So what he also talks about is this idea of shared institutions, cultural beliefs, society group norms become part of what we say the collective consciousness, a collective idea is, and they are used and painted as morals that we use to constrain people at the bottom who may feel or believe different. So if you don't adopt the views and the ideas of the dominant society, you're looked at as somehow wrong and immoral. So that is a functionalist view. You have to worship the head of the government. And it also ties to this understanding of evolution in society. So society, according to Durkheim, has gone through two major types of changes. The traditional society, which was more agricultural and farming and things like that, was based on something we call mechanical solidarity. And essentially what it is family. Essentially your government, your society was essentially your family, and you farmed for what you needed. You developed kinships with those who are around you. It was based on this idea of self-sufficiency and morality based upon divine beliefs. So it was you as a head of household, and only people above you would be, of course, whomever you worship. And you believed everything given to you was given to you through divine nature. Fast forward to the modern society, we have still kind of the same thing, except we call it organic solidarity, where we have to create family in order to survive. So with differentiated social and economic structures and division of labor, we create an interdependence upon one another. So I may not know the person who drives trucks that brings meat from farms and factories to the grocery store, but I need them. I may not know the custodian, but I know I need a clean bathroom, in public places, right? So it doesn't matter to me who they are my brother because they do something I need. Also think of it like this. If we worked on a factory where I put widget 182 onto widget 183, and that's all I did all day, the person next to me who takes that product and then adds another piece on becomes my brother in a sense, right? So we share common complaints, common perspectives, things like that. We become organically a family. And that kind of spawned the basis of labor unions and things like that, because it was a solidarity created by the work circumstance. And if you think about positive psychology, or more Adlerian psychology, there are three things that the human being is consumed with: occupation, love, and family. So, and if you think about occupation, that consumes the average person's life. It's essentially 8 to 12 hours a day where that person is consumed in work or work-related activity. If you think from the time you wake up and get ready for work to the time you travel to work and then work 8 hours and then come home, you're traveling back through traffic to get home, to unwind and prepare for the next day, that could easily be 10 or 12 hours a day. And then if you sleep 8 hours, you don't have much left. And all that time left, you fill up with love and family. So that becomes an important aspect of the modern society and how organic solidarity is built. We actually know our coworkers sometimes better than we know our children. So functionalism also has an interesting perspective on compensation. For example, a functionalist, which majority of our society is based upon functionalism as its philosophical and theoretical construct. In a functionalist society, inequality is natural. Inequality is natural because people are different. And what we're saying is that based on your skill and the uniqueness of your talent, that determines how much money you earn. So in order to earn extraordinary amounts of money, you have to be able to do something that very few people can do, but everyone wants you to do it. So you have to have a talent that we care for, and we're willing to pay you to have that talent. Say, for example, LeBron James has a contract with the Los Angeles Lakers for 4 years, $164 million. When you break that down, that is $106,000 a day. Think about that. $106,000 a day. How can we justify giving one person $106,000 a day, knowing most of us don't make that in a year? In the same country where a person is eating out of a trash can right now. But we do it because he has a skill and a talent that's rare. And for him to have that, we will pay a handsome fee for him to have and demonstrate that talent. So under functionalism, there's no such thing as domination. It's not done out of cruelty. It's done out of recognizing that not everyone can play the same role. So because of that, he gets access to things that we can't, particularly compensation, better home, better lifestyle, things like that, because of his unique talent and skill. Dysfunction in society, according to the functionalists, only happens when society's out of balance. It's when the hand doesn't want to be the hand anymore. The hand tries to be the head. It's only when people go outside of their quote unquote predetermined role that they become problematic in society. But we have it set up a way where everyone plays their particular role. And it's a very deep concept because if you think about it like this, even those who go against the law are needed in society, because we have whole careers that are created because of dysfunction and because of the irrational, right? So because of that, we have prison wardens, we have correction officers, we have the healthcare industry, we have all these industries that make their money dealing with the irrational of society. So in a sense, they're needed. I used to tell a cruel joke in my old high school that we need everything in the making of society. We need people to paint the lines up the street. We need people to drink alcohol because we have an excise tax on alcohol that benefits highway construction and education, things like that. But we have all of that. Whenever you don't have, everyone playing their role, what we have is called anime, which is simply is a lack of social regulation, which means we're out of whack. Next, understanding this, if you've ever taken a sociology course and you talk about social stratification, what you're talking about is functionalism. The modern version of functionalism is known as social stratification, which simply means that majority of people are born into the social class that they will live and die in. And that works for about 80 to 90% of people. You can move from one class to another, but generally it's based on luck or a particular skill or unique talent that you have. So the only way to explain a Jay-Z is that he has a unique skill that not very few people can have. And that enables him to move from one social status in life to a higher social status in life. And that's just the way it is. In addition to this, we need to understand functionalism and how it plays in schools. What it creates is an imbalanced system based upon providing, roles for people in society. So we're actually training people for society based on functionalism. So if you think about magnet programs, right? We think of magnet programs, when we come in to put a person in a magnet program, we're actually repairing schools and reforming schools, where we create a magnet program at a school to lift the average test score up. We don't improve instruction. We just add 200 more students who score very high, and that brings the average up. But the magnet program, students in the magnet program can exist at that school all day and never come into contact with students in the standard program. Maybe their gym classes, maybe the cafeteria, but for the most part, no. International baccalaureate programs operate the same as a magnet. They just may be a little smaller. My last school had 20% of the school population was in the IB program, yet every decision made benefited 20%, and the other 80% were lucky to get the scraps of what was left from the program. So, since functionalism rewards people for staying in their particular place. And also, most tracking programs are built on the idea of functionalism. So if we think about it, in a general tracking program, we have 3 tracks. We have honors, standard, and exceptional, or special education. Honor students are trained as leaders. We talk to them like they're leaders. We prepare them like they're future leaders, things like that. Standard students are trained as future workers. In fact, many of our threats to them is, you need this to get a job. So we're training them to be future workers of the leaders. And our exceptional children, we're actually training them on the job as we speak. For example, in my last high school, our special ed students were given a work kind of release thing that they did. They were actually during school half of the day, and then they would go to other job sites and were allowed to work for no pay. And the work they were doing was custodial work or groundskeeping work. But we were training them on the job for menial labor. And that became the impetus of that kind of tracking. So they rarely had contact with our general ed students, and they were actually treated like they were getting on-the-job training at that moment. Now, functionalists also serve purposes, at least 4 distinct purposes in education. So the first one is a functionalist sees education for its intellectual purpose. School is made to acquire cognitive skills. In fact, we say things like we're teaching people how to speak well and how to read and things like that. It's also a place where you go to acquire knowledge, where you can come back and recite approved facts. And if you do it well enough, we say that you're smart, right? But when I say about recitation of approved facts, somebody has to decide what is worth learning and what isn't. And if you can master the vocabulary of what we've decided is worthwhile knowledge, we'll call you smart. If you do it very well, you'll get A's in all your classes, and then you'll go off to college. And if you do it extremely well and you get a scholarship, you go off to college for free. It doesn't mean you're smarter. It just means that you can rattle off a bunch of approved facts better than anyone else. But it doesn't mean you can think when things go wrong. When thinking is learning what to do when there aren't any directions. And the last intellectual purpose of education is to acquire inquiry skills, to learn how to ask questions. So it is that idea of learning how to be an intellectual, how to use the inquiry method, things like that. Also, school serves a political purpose. We are literally using schools and education to teach people how to be citizens. We like to say other countries indoctrinate their students. I'm old enough to remember when we would criticize the Soviet Union because we were saying that their education program was an indoctrination program. But what is the Pledge of Allegiance? What is government class? What is history class? We're literally teaching political affiliation. We're literally promoting patriotism. We're teaching obedience to America. The second you make every student in the class stand up and cover their heart, you are just the same as, those we say are indoctrinating students, where we're teaching obedience. It also is used to assimilate immigrants. And we know the whole idea of Americanization. And that goes back to the idea of Americanizing Native Americans and making them more like white students. And that has actual implications for school uniforms, because school uniforms originated in this idea of Americanization of the Native Americans. And of course, political purposes is used to ensure public civility and conformity. It is used to teach obedience. It's used to keep those at the bottom understanding how to stay at the bottom and be happy with being at the bottom, and used to have those elites remain elite. And also, functionalist purposes of education encompass economic purposes. What we're doing with schools is preparing people for later work roles. So we're preparing, schools are necessary to create more workers for the future. We can call it 21st century skills. We can call it whatever we want. It is to create more workers. It is to select and train people for a future labor force. Not that they can do and learn anything they want to, but it is to create a future labor force, to teach socialization. And the crime in that is that we decide early on, based upon how a student looks, how they have economic means, as to what future labor force we're getting them prepared for. And that is the reason why a lot of students in urban education, a lot of parents, when you start mentioning career and technical education, or what we call CTE, they go backwards because they remember vocational school, and they remember being kind of forced upon this idea that you are being prepared to work with your hands, stuff like that. So in that sense, those are the economic purposes of education. The social purposes are we're trying to actually teach moral and social responsibility. We're trying to teach values. We're trying to resolve social problems in society through education. And we also use education to supplement the socialization of other institutions. So schools are often looked at to do what family cannot, or do what church cannot. Because if family were, working the way we idealize it to be, we would be a lot more gentler with our neighbors. We would be a lot more grounded in our behaviors. And if church were doing what we believe it was supposed to do, we'd be more moral in our actions. So what school does is comes along to actually enforce that upon others. So I'm going to stop right here and leave functionalism alone. The next thing we'll transition to will be conflict theory, or Marxist theory. So we'll end here with that and then move to Marxist theory.